Hello and welcome to another episode of Brothers Creed Podcast. We're talking about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan. Today we are speaking with Chad Webster. He is a retired police officer. He is an author. He is a father. He's an excellent guy. We talked to him about his life, his hobbies, about being a police officer, all the way from the academy at the beginning to some of the struggles he had towards the end of his 20-year career with the riots and some mental struggles that he had with PTSD and a couple of things that forced him into retirement. We had a great conversation, learned how we can all become better people, better members of the community, better participants in our families, and being aware of our mental health.
Better stewards of our mental health. It was he advocated for that quite a bit. I liked that.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a great one. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
All right, today we have a special guest with us, Chad Webster. Chad, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Oh, appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I've known Chad for quite a while, several years now. You are a father, a retired police officer, an author, and an all-around great guy. So we've been trying to get you on the podcast for quite some time now, but finally we got you, and we have a kind of some good questions about your career and the past several years, your retirement, and really kind of asking you about your growth and personal creed as well.
How many years did you serve on the force, Chad?
Almost 19.
Oh, okay. It's quite a long time.
Which sounds like a long time, but during it really didn't feel that long.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, were you the whole time here in the Charlotte area, CMPD?
Yeah, I was never an officer anywhere else. It was my whole career in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And I never really even wanted to be a cop growing up at all. I mean, it just seemed like kind of a far-fetched thing that wasn't for me. But like all my life, all my jobs were in customer service, and I enjoyed helping people. And I thought that becoming an officer would give me the meaning that I was looking for, plus I would be helping people. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny. I was actually a manager of a pool and spa store, and one of the guys from the academy was a customer, and he came in and I like tested his pool water or something, and I was like, man, say something to him. And I chickened out. I was like, I should have said something to him. And he goes out to his car, and like 30 seconds later, he comes back in and he's like, hey, I forgot to ask you a question. Ask me. And then I said, hey, I meant to ask you a question. And we started talking about the academy. And a year or so later, because it takes almost that long to do a background check, I was in the academy.
How old were you?
27 when I started.
Nice.
Is that kind of older, or is that?
It is. It is a little bit older. I wasn't the oldest guy in my academy class. But I mean, usually, these kids know right out of college, like, hey, I'm going to college for
criminal
justice. Yeah. And they know that that's what they're going to do. And, they're 22 years old when they hit the street.
Wow.
I wasn't mature enough at 22 to do this job. So I think the timing was just right.
Did you feel like going in with a little bit of, kind of rounding closer to 30, that gave you kind of maybe an edge or a leg up in wisdom or experience?
I would say a life experience, leg up, it's I mean, you see, obviously, the more you see, the more you can understand about people, the longer you live. And I just, like I said, would not have been ready, and I wouldn't have had enough life experience coming right out of college. So it's probably great for some guys, definitely physically. You know, you're coming out of college and you're taking care of yourself and you can be in great shape. And, 27 is not old, but, it was tough to keep up with some of the younger guys.
Yeah. So you were, did you start as a patrol officer, and then how did that kind of develop as your 19 years on the force? Because I know kind of towards the end you got more into kind of a community relations role. How did that unfold?
Yeah, you start out in patrol. That's where we all start. So I did several years of that. Absolutely loved it. Going from call to call to call, staying busy. I loved it. And one of the reasons I got into law enforcement was because of domestic violence, and wanting to make a difference there. So from my patrol, I started doing more domestic violence stuff and focusing on that. Was a training officer for several years where I would train the rookies out of the academy. Really enjoyed that. Another reason to stay busy and get in as many calls and as many big calls as you can. So that was a lot of fun.
What kind of drew you into domestic violence?
It's just something that's always irked me.
Yeah.
That cycle of these, mainly women that are caught in these situations. And to me, it is, even if it's not physical, it is just one of the most pathetic crimes. I mean, I don't know how you can look at yourself in the mirror knowing that you're physically, psychologically manipulating, this female that you're supposed to be caring for. I just
abuse of power.
I was very passionate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, as time went on, I really only felt like every now and then I was making a difference. Mm-hmm. Because so many of the real domestic violence doesn't get reported.
Yep.
It's kind of like rape and sexual assault.
Yep.
The real bad ones never get the attention that they should.
Oh, yeah.
And then a lot of times domestic violence court is used for a back and forth, whether it's about children or custody or the house or, so there's a lot of tit for tat kind of stuff that goes on that you really don't feel like you're making a difference. But then after so many cases where you get one here and there that you really help, it's worthwhile.
Yeah. Now, Chad, you might not know this about me, but I'm a data analyst by trade, or data scientist, I guess is what my degree says. But I'm curious I'm sure that over the years you see different trends in different types of calls, like whether those be domestic violence or surges in drug usage or child abuse or like shootings or different things like that. Did you see any types of patterns and changes over the time that you were working in Charlotte?
It's interesting because you could almost tell what time of the year it was by looking at the calls.
Really? Wow.
And I patrolled around, UNCC for years.
Okay.
So, you'd see a lot more domestic calls around the holidays. People are off school, off work, they're at home, families in town. People are drinking more. You see a lot more domestics, and then over the summer you see lots of noise complaints and assaults, and like the bars and restaurants would be busy, and in the winter overnight it's just so quiet until every now and then something huge happens. But and you get all the robberies during the summer.
Really?
People don't like moving around when it's cold.
Yeah, yeah. And you could always almost tell what time it was, because you could say, all right, all the drug dealers are getting up. It's 11 o'clock. It's noon. So you start getting these calls that are drug related, or
Wow.
complaints about whatever happened the night before. People are waking up realizing, what happened the previous night. So and of course, the warmer it is, the crazier it is. And I'm a firm believer in full moons making people crazy. Let's put it that way.
Women giving birth and people going nutso.
Yep.
Interesting. That's wild.
Yeah, and if you're analyzing data all the time, there's the data and then how it's presented. So I always say there's three kinds of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So
I think Mark Twain said that.
Yeah, I never took much stock in, and the cities want to see a reduction in crime. But at the same time, they don't want to get harassed.
Yeah.
And it's a hard juggling act to get out there and do your job and do your best to reduce crime. And a lot of times, in order to do that, you have to be proactive. And when you're proactive, you generate complaints from people that feel like they're getting harassed, or they're out, we're out looking for specific things and targeting people. But then if you don't do that, it's like, why are these cops sitting around drinking coffee, not doing anything?
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that really wore on me over the years, was kind of being caught in that catch-22. And that's how I got into more of the community stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that develop? So you were a patrol officer for a while, and then I kind of sidetracked us from your story. So how did you get into the community side?
Well, it was a community coordinator position opened up, and a buddy of mine he had the other position. And he's like, hey, I just told my supervisor you're going to be the next coordinator. I was like, oh, okay. So it kind of, I had to go through the process and an interview and all that kind of stuff, and got the position. And it was a lot different. I wasn't answering calls for service and 911 calls like I was, but I really liked being able to have these personal interactions with people that weren't enforcement actions. To let people see that, hey, we're not all robots, we're actually people inside this uniform, and then we got onto the kids stuff and reading to kids, and a lot of stuff that can't be captured statistically.
Yeah.
Or it can maybe over the years. So I felt like it was great work, but it's hard to measure. So city council can't say, all the coordinators at CMPD were able to keep this number of kids, off the street or from, getting into crime. It's nothing tangible that you can say made a difference. So it's hard to realize that it's still making a difference.
And then when budget cuts come through, I'm sure that's one of the first place they cut budgets is where they can't see statistical increase or track down with specific numbers.
Yeah, because when crime rises, you don't want to hear about officers reading to kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when we were doing our Bears Behind the Badge program, where we'd go into these elementary schools and read, and we would bring stuffed animals and say, hey, this is your reading buddy. Try to read to your reading buddy every night. We would have kids in tears when we arrived in their classroom because they were afraid of us for whatever reason. A lot of times it's because the police have been called to their house or somebody's been locked up. But they'd go from tears to like hugging us and hanging on us, by the time we left. And that's within 30 to 60 minutes.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was always rewarding.
I heard something sometime that that I've actually really kind of taken to heart. And, you know, a lot of parents will, you know, when their kids act up or when their kids aren't acting right, they'll say, you know, well, I'm gonna have the police come and take you to jail, and they'll like threaten that to their kids, that the police are going to come and they're going to take you away and throw you in jail. And you know, I was listening to something several years ago, and it was like, don't do that, because you know, kids need to have someone that they can in an emergency, if they, you know, need help from something that they want to, if they see a police officer, they should be able to run up to that person and know that they're going to help them, and not to fear and think that, oh, if I, you know, a police officer is just going to take me to jail and then, you know, take me away from my family. And so it was kind of like a warning to parents to kind of like build police officers up a little bit. You know, nobody's perfect, obviously, but don't make your kids afraid of them by threatening that to them.
Yeah, we used to harp on that at every community meeting. You know, don't even kid around with them, because God forbid they do need an officer. They need to be able to come over to us.
Yeah.
You know, and we would always tell kids, hey, if you can't find a police officer, you know, find a lady with kids. You know, something like along those lines. But it's not even cool to joke about it with kids, because you know, some cops are really intimidating. You know, I mean, I was like 5'1.5", 170 pounds. I wasn't intimidating, but some guys are huge and jacked and tattoos and can be the nicest guys and need to be intimidating in other ways. So you don't want to add that on top of, you know, hey, the police are just going to take you away if you don't behave.
Yeah.
Some cops look like Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah. I mean, and you're actually weakening yourself as a parent when you say, well, if you don't listen to me, I'll have to call the police. And we used to get those calls in the mornings when kids wouldn't go to school. It's like, why are you calling us?
Yeah.
They have no reason to listen to you now until you call us and we arrive.
Yeah.
You've totally weakened your stance as a parent that's in charge.
Yeah.
So it's detrimental in that way as well.
Yeah. One of the cool things that I've known several police officers, some actually, I know a few CMPD officers right now, but you get such a breadth of experiences. I mean, it's like you're out on the streets, talking with people, meeting with people, you're in all these different experiences. I was wondering if you could share two experiences with us. One, could you share an experience where you saw something that was kind of miraculous, or that you just that was just maybe like a really cool, positive miracle type of experience? And then I've got to ask this other question: did you ever see anything like paranormal or anything like that while you were on the beat?
Okay, so one of the coolest things, I don't know if that's the coolest thing, but one thing that really stands out to me was there was a call we got about a dog attack. This dog attacked a lady running. I think it was a pit bull. Like tore her arm up, and an officer got there and had to shoot the dog. Well, if you know anything about shooting a dog, you don't want to shoot its head, because literally the bullet will travel along that skull and out, and the dog will run off.
Oh, really?
You really have to shoot it in the body.
Oh, really? Huh.
Which is awful, but you're getting attacked by a pit bull. You're just out for a jog.
Yeah.
An officer shows up, and so the officer shot the dog, and it ran away. But the lady was safe, and she got in the ambulance and was getting treatment. And we actually had to set up basically a crime scene in this neighborhood. Well, the dog that was shot didn't really run home, but kind of ran near home and then sat down, not feeling well due to the gunshot. Well, then the owner finds out the police shot their dog. Has no idea that it attacked someone. People were complaining that these dogs were running around the neighborhood consistently, but it's hard to feel bad.
Yeah.
for, I mean, you feel bad for the dog because they're not being taken care of. You feel bad for the lady that got, attacked. So I'm in the crime scene on the inside of the police line tape, and the owner of the dog has heard that we've shot his dog. And when you hear the police shot your dog, it's all police.
Yeah.
So everybody's responsible. So he starts to come under the police tape, and that is a misdemeanor. And he is fuming, rightfully so, because he doesn't know all the information yet. And I was about to arrest him. I was about to grab him because he was coming towards me in a threatening manner, screaming, pointing, yelling, and he wasn't listening to me to stay behind the tape. So I in actuality, had legal right to take him to the ground and handcuff him.
Yeah.
But he came at me, and I just remember feeling that wasn't the right thing to do in this situation. And I just put my hand on his chest and said, hang on. Not the last thing you want to say to somebody that's all riled up.
Just calm down. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been one to say that. So I just had this immediate feeling that he didn't know all the information, and me locking him up for this while illegal wasn't the right thing to do. And I just remember feeling that so strongly, and that's not something I normally would have done. So, I mean, it's not miraculous,
No,
but it's just sometimes you get those feelings and you don't want to ignore them.
Yeah.
So I've really felt good after that, because it's so easy to forget. I'm looking at this whole situation from all the information I have.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it from all the information he has. All he knows is somebody came to his house freaking out that the police shot his dog.
Yeah. I like that, because it's that's what a multifaceted police officer was what we want as a community. If we don't want just a hammer, because then the only thing a hammer knows how to do is smashing a nail. So someone who has varying different techniques of dealing with people is exactly the type of police officer that we need. So that's a very good story.
Right. And who knows, if I had been the first one to arrive, and would I have been able to shoot the dog? How would I have handled it?
Yeah.
It's just very cool how sometimes
that dog would be dead if you'd have handled it.
I mean, you just don't know. The right officer got there at the right time, and had it been me that arrived there first, I might not have done the right thing. And had that officer been in my shoes, he might not have done what I did.
Yeah.
So, there's sometimes bigger things at play when you're dealing with, craziness like that.
Yeah. That's cool.
What was the other question?
So
you said
any kind of paranormal experiences did you have on your 19 years?
I can't really think of any. A lot of the university area, though, was just all new stuff.
Yeah.
It was just constantly, I've heard of other things, in different parts of Charlotte where officers are like, nope, I don't go into that building, or, I don't do this or that, but not really, which
that's good.
Would have been cool, I think.
Well, you're not driving over any old battlefields or anything like that, so.
Right. What's so funny, though, is you have, police are people, and we all have our little tics, and we all have our little fears. And like some of my buddies are like, there's these bad A guys, and they're afraid of spiders.
Yeah.
Or they're afraid of snakes, or, and they're like going into these situations where most normal people would be afraid. And then they're like freaking out, if there's a spider, or it's just so funny that, the real you, comes through sometimes. So that was some of the funniest, things I've seen, just people being people, and they just happen to be wearing a uniform.
That's great.
Maybe that's what the title of the episode should be. Cops are people too. Right?
Yeah. Well, what's fun? You say that, but it's one of the few professions where it's easy to label an entire profession based on the actions of one individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to do in a lot of other jobs.
Yeah.
If you hear about a teacher somewhere, assaulting a student, you don't say, "Oh, geez, teachers are just out there beating our kids." And,
Yeah.
You look at it as, wow, that one teacher, what a jerk,
Yeah.
And you say that about a lot of things.
Yeah.
You talk about that one individual, but for some reason, when it is a brotherhood and a sisterhood and you're all wearing, a badge and a gun, and it's just easy to group us in. And that's the last thing that the general public wants done to them. And it's one of the first things that's done to officers.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time in our specific community trying to build that trust, trying to let people know that we were people. And I constantly try to use my sense of humor, probably too much and maybe inappropriately sometimes, but to let people know that we're people too.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of time and energy into that.
Not just a robotic enforcement arm of the government.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's easy to say, it's easy to feel targeted even when you just get pulled over for speeding.
Yeah.
It like, why me? I saw this other car and blah, blah, blah. Well, I saw you were going fast. I turned the radar on and I got you. I didn't know who you were when I pulled you over.
Yeah.
It's not something personal. And then you ask the person that got pulled over, oh, who was the officer? I don't know. You don't think about it being an individual. You just think the cops pulled you over.
Yeah.
And we write our names on the citations so you know who it is and who you're dealing with. And that was the first thing I always did on a traffic stop. I said who I was, who I worked for, and why I pulled you over.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no confusion, no question. I never did well, do you know why I pulled you over? And trying to get them to say why they got pulled over. It doesn't put people at ease. You're already nervous as crap because you're getting pulled over.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to make it as much of an interaction as I could.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Humanize it. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's people, we get neighborhoods where people complain about all the speeding. And then we go out and run radar and run LiDAR and pull people over. And then they complain that the police are all pulling everybody over in the neighborhood. And, 9 times out of 10, you'll pull over one of the people that were complaining about speeding. And it's again, one of
rules
those
for
crazy
thee, not
jobs.
for me.
Yeah. I see other people speeding. Go get them. I can do what I want.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know it's been about a year and a half since you retired. I know that you left the force due to several different reasons. Would you be able to kind of walk us through the lead up to that and what happened there?
So, over the course of almost 19 years and being in patrol and just wearing the uniform, you see the worst of people. You see the worst situations, and it wears on you. Mm-hmm. And we're in this tough guy, tough girl environment where you're weak if it bothers you. And a lot of times you don't really have time to think about it because you're going from call to call, shift to shift. You don't really get to process it, or if you do, you compartmentalize it and you don't really deal with it. So I was getting worn down already. And then during the last riots in Charlotte in 2020, I just had I don't want to say snap, but I was on the front line of the riots. They were throwing mortars and frozen water bottles and fireworks, and we were in a line and I was surrounded and we were told to stand down. And I felt I mean, I was scared. I was really scared. One of the few times I was truly scared during my career. And, we were told not to do anything. And I remember laughing at the situation. And I'm like, this isn't a normal response to this situation. Why did I laugh? But, then we were pushing people back and clearing streets and blah, blah, blah. And, I was on the bicycle riot team. So we're riding all over the areas, using our bikes to push people back and create lines and, what we normally do when there's riots and protests. And this time, before even that, I had people, inch from my face, screaming just all sorts of profanities and just the worst things that I'd ever heard. Almost some of the worst things I'd ever heard as a cop, being screamed at me. And you just have to take it. You just sit there. You try to let it go in one ear and out the other. And you look out for fellow officers who, if it looks like they're getting agitated, you try to replace them with someone who, is fresh on the line. But in this case, I didn't feel like I needed that, and I was fine and continued on working. And then started having trouble sleeping. Didn't want to go to work. Started having nightmares. Run down. Didn't want to fall asleep because of the nightmares. I found myself afraid and panicking. I've never had panic attacks in my life, and I'll wake up in a cold sweat, panicking, could hardly breathe. I didn't know what was going on at all, and ended up going to the doctor. And at first it was, sounds like I have anxiety and blah, blah, blah. And then we started putting the not wanting to be around crowds, having the nightmares and the night sweats and panic that I'd never had before, and started drinking to kind of numb that what's going on thing.
Yeah.
And that didn't help. And then I was officially diagnosed with PTSD, and my primary physician, my therapist, and psychologist or psychiatrist were like, you're done in this profession. This, sorry to say, but this is not something that you can do anymore. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And it got worse and got worse. I actually didn't leave my bedroom for 6 weeks.
Wow. That's tough.
Yeah, I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was drinking, not sleeping, but wanting to sleep, but not wanting to sleep because of nightmares.
Yeah.
And
with family and kids and everything else. I mean, that's
It's
brutal.
a low spot.
Brutal.
And it's, it was just like one day I was good. The next day I wasn't. And it was crazy. Like, oh, hey, by the way, your career's over. And your kids are seeing you fall apart, basically. My wife was just like, what? Someone who's always trying to help people is looking at her husband like, I don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
And people would ask me, and I'm like, I don't know what I need. I don't know what you could do. And it was so frustrating. Initially, it was so embarrassing. It's not like I'm a tough guy, but I never saw myself, this happening, anything like this happening to me. So that was a hard pill to swallow. And then hearing your career's over from, 3 different sources, and then having to go file paperwork that says, hey, due to mental health issues and PTSD, I have to medically retire from this job. And that was, I'm summarizing here,
Yeah.
very quickly, but it was let's see, it'll be 2 years ago this June. And I am like just now good. Like this year, I'm good. I've been taking medications, which I hate doing, weekly therapy still.
Yeah.
But, over time, I've realized there's nothing for me to be embarrassed about. I shouldn't be any more embarrassed about PTSD than I am for getting the flu.
Yep.
It's not something I've done. It was a perfect storm that, several other officers experienced as well. And maybe they're perfectly fine. Maybe they're not. And they just can't admit it. Maybe they're still going to work, wondering what's wrong and not being, the best version of themselves. So I realized that it's not weak for this to happen.
Yeah.
It's weak to not get help.
Yeah, totally.
It's strong to say, wow, I'm not how I was and I need help for it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard to do.
Absolutely. We did an interview with a guy, he calls himself the tactical chaplain, and he's a retired police officer, and he's kind of like a chaplain that works with police officers who to talk about mental health, to talk about this kind of stuff, because he says a lot of times you get this tough guy mentality and you overlook stuff, how you feel, you overlook this trauma that you're getting, and it burns people out, and they'll turn to all kinds of stuff to try to cover up the pain that they're feeling. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's so true. And I mean, like, you think about these riots and stuff, and sometimes we see, on the news how they're mostly peaceful, but the businesses are burning in the background and people are getting hurt. I'm being facetious there, but
yeah,
well, CNN did say that. But these entire communities are being destroyed, and sometimes I think, oh man, those poor businesses that are being destroyed. But really, the poor police officers that are there being told to do basically nothing because of the politics of the situation, and they're suffering too from this whole situation. And so I think that can be overlooked.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I mean, I'm all for, getting your voice out there.
Yeah.
And I feel like probably the majority of protesters that are from a city they're protesting in don't want to destroy their own city.
Yeah.
But there are so many paid protesters brought in from all over the country. They do this professionally.
Yeah.
And that's kind of anti-politics. Like, everybody wants attention on it, but do you really want the attention to go from what you're trying to stand up for to, burning buildings and cities getting destroyed and people getting needlessly arrested and hurt? And
it's like,
that's the sad part of it.
Yeah, it's like, how did this pallet of bricks get here on the corner in the middle of the city? It's like,
yep. I mean,
also,
that's one thing that they have. We have people go out all over the place looking for things like that protesters will stash, all over.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. So
I know you said
it ties up a lot of resources.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know you said that, like, when the kind of the, I guess, your leaders told you just, don't do anything or stand down or whatever else, you said you kind of laughed internally or maybe out loud. How did that make you feel? Did you kind of feel like, well, why am I even here if I'm not going to do anything? It's almost like the police being here, if we can't do anything, is almost just riling the people up more. I don't know, how'd you feel about that?
Like, go and be punished, basically, is what they're saying.
Well, I mean, that's true. And there's a lot of situations where we knew there was going to be protests, and, our upper command staff have to decide, are we going to send them out there in riot gear? Are we going to send them out without it? Are we going to just send out the bike units? Because it does invoke a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And, me just standing there outside of uniform in normal clothes is nothing. I put that uniform on and I'm standing there. Okay, it's a little different now. Now I have on riot gear and a helmet and all that. That's another story.
Less personal, so more of a robot.
Right. Now it's like, oh, you want trouble? You're prepared for trouble?
Yeah.
You're going to get it, kind of thing. So they were always juggling, our safety, their safety, and what kind of message we wanted to send. But as far as the laugh goes, it was, I feel, my body's central nervous system response to something I didn't have control over.
Yeah.
And that's what my body had to do to keep going that night.
Yeah. I can only imagine too, kind of the feeling that your wife and even your kids are feeling. I mean, they're probably at home worried like crazy that even more that dad's going to come home in these types of situations. I mean, I can't even imagine, number one, how you would feel, but also how your wife would feel in that type of situation.
Or the effects of what the situation would have.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I hate to say it, but usually the police are the last thing you think about when there's big events or things like this.
Yeah.
Like when there's a Carolina Panther game, you don't think about all the officers that are making sure the area around the stadium and inside the stadium and directing traffic. And, after a team wins the World Series or the Super Bowl, like how many cops are out there trying to keep it safe for everybody that's celebrating. And you just don't think about them or their families as much because you're like, oh, most of us are just like, well, I'm going to the game. Yay, we won. I want to celebrate. And,
yeah.
You don't really think about it, but it does. It's very similar to a military family, except that we're home and we don't see necessarily as crazy stuff as active members in the military will see, but it's along those same lines.
Yeah.
And it's, I was, my kids and my wife are looking at me. I don't want to go through a day sober. I'm crying 1 minute, I'm laughing the next, I'm not saying anything the next minute, I'm up all night watching TV, I'm sleeping all day, then I'm sleeping all night. And why isn't daddy coming out of his room? And it was
yeah.
it's
I was gonna say I think there's, I guess I have no idea, but you would probably have a better idea than anyone, but I would suspect that there's lots of people that struggle with that. I mean, just mental health in general is something that affects everyone to a certain extent, and especially, like you said, among potentially military professionals or, police officers or anyone else who is exposed to just continuous traumatic events. I don't know. It's just, it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of equate it to car maintenance. If you're not putting gas in the car, you're not, changing the oil, you're not getting tune-ups, you're not rotating your tires, your car's going to run like crap.
Yeah.
And our mental health is the same way. You have to treat it the same way. There's maintenance to do. There's things you have to come to terms with. There's things you should be talking about. And when you don't, your car breaks down, you break down.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think people should be, embarrassed about mental health issues.
Yep.
It's maintenance. It's just like anything else. You wouldn't want to stop being in shape because, I don't know where I'm going with that.
If you're not in shape, you can't be an athlete. Like, you can't be expected to do athletic things and play on the Carolina Panthers, if you're not in shape. And so to be a police officer and not be in mental shape, that's like you're going to break a bone or you're going to break something in your brain because you're not ready to confront all those traumas that are happening all the time.
So did
I've realized in my, I don't want to say recovery, but in my healing and my process here, how related physical self-care is to mental self-care.
Yeah.
Sitting around doing nothing, not being in motion allows your mind to do the same thing. Your mind gets lazy and weak and out of shape. And we need to take care of both of those things. We need to take care of ourselves physically, spiritually, mentally. And when you don't, you're going to feel that wear and tear.
Yeah.
So did the city or the PD, did they have the same mentality of mental sickness is equivalent to physical sickness or physical injury as far as retirement goes?
No, and that was, well, I mean, we do a lot of education about mental illness, and I was actually a member of our crisis intervention team that, we would specifically respond to people having a mental health crisis. And we're real big on making ourselves aware of those situations and educated on it for the public. But I think as a profession, we don't do a good enough job taking care of ourselves in that regard. And that's something that needs to improve. And when I came to my supervisors about what was happening, I had to fill out, an injury report. And this injury report is specifically designed for a physical injury. And it's not designed for a mental injury. So that was frustrating. And during the course of retiring, instead of just giving my statement of what happened one time, I had to give it several times and relive it. And that was not good for my mental health and for my healing. So I kept having to relive that night over and over just to tell these people, someone from CMPD, someone from the city, someone from risk management, it was having to say it over and over. And instead,
traumatic.
But my therapist is like, you can't say this story anymore.
Oh yeah.
You can't. And when it came to workers' comp, I wouldn't give a statement again. And okay, so Officer Webster refusing to give a statement. How are we going to give him, workers' comp if you want to give a statement?
Mm-hmm.
I've already given statements. Can't you use the statements I've given? So that whole process needs to change, not only in police departments, but probably everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't have a one size fits all for physical and mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yep, totally.
And even when the city had me reevaluated after I'd been retired for 6 or 7 months, I had to take it to my psychiatrist, and every question on there was pretty much geared towards a physical injury. And I'm like, this is the wrong size for me. This is not.
Seems like a massive gap.
What you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it had been my knee, I'd be going to physical therapy, or I'd have surgery and, be rehabbing my physical injury. And that's what all these questions are about. Can he physically do the job now?
But instead, they're asking you
physically do it, right?
They're asking you over and over again. It's like having a torn ligament in your knee, and then them saying, "Hey, we want you to jump up and down on that one knee to show us that it's injured." Every single time you had to go, it's the same
before
thing.
It's healed.
They have you rehash all this stuff mentally, and they just don't realize that they're causing harm every single time they, make you rehash every single little detail of every single thing that happened.
Yeah, the stigma of being a weak person because of a mental health issue, we need to change it.
Yeah.
There's so many other things that people are out there standing up for that, that's great. I may not agree with them all. I may not disagree with them all. And a lot of them only apply to a small portion of the population, but mental health, that could potentially be anyone and everyone.
Yep.
So I think making it more aware that it's not anything you did, and it's not your fault that you're in that situation. I mean, that's like saying, someone has a traumatic brain injury because of a car accident, and it's their fault.
Yeah.
Why do you have a traumatic brain injury? Well, I didn't choose it. It's.
Yeah, exactly. So now 2 years after the fact, all that's been settled. They you're wrapped all that up with the CMPD, with the city, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, that's all over and done with. I got my settlement with the city. I have my my retirement disability. I'll still have to be reevaluated periodically. I'm still in weekly therapy, but that's going pretty good. I'm hoping to reduce the number of times I have to see my therapist. I've reduced some medication and just gone to one medication that's specifically for PTSD. And so far that seems to be going well. So, living at the beach, not in Charlotte, helps a lot. I don't have those triggers of being in that area, which was a big issue early on. Just being around where I worked, wasn't good for me. So
yeah, I was gonna say, what are some things that you've done to, I guess, healthily cope with? Do you have hobbies? I know you are a published author. Do you find yourself kind of attracted to other things to help cope with what you were going through mentally?
So, yeah, I mean, working out.
Yeah,
that's one of my big priorities now, and giving my whole self to therapy is a big part of it too. A lot of people don't want to be that exposed or show that kind of a weakness, and to me, that's like, saying, "Oh, I want to run a marathon, but I'm only going to run a half a mile at a time." And then when the marathon gets there, you're frustrated you can't run the 26.2 miles. Like, well, you haven't been training to get to that point. So it's pointless to, you get out what you put in when it comes to therapy. So, and I've stayed busy. I was driving my wife around for her real estate appointments, bringing the kids here and there. Recently started back up with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I did for years and then stopped. To write actually was one of the reasons I had put a hold on Jiu-Jitsu. So really just taking care of myself physically and mentally, like I talked about before, it has made a huge impact on my mental health.
I like that.
And unfortunately, being in that weird headspace, being creative was the last thing on my mind. So I haven't, I had my 2 Mystery Muffin and Soda Pop Sleuth books published a while back. I had finished another fiction piece that didn't get picked up by my publisher, which I'm still trying to get published by somebody else. And I have vowed that I'm going to write a story about a retired officer with PTSD who moves to the beach and starts a private investigation office. So that's my current work.
Cool. I think that's an awesome outlet. I've always, been really intrigued by kind of that outlet of writing, and I know you did some of the writing on, kind of as you were doing some of these, I guess, side work as a police officer, and you had a little bit of time, late at night when things were a little bit quiet to kind of think and be creative and stuff like that. So you have 2 books out right now currently, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's 2 Mystery Muffin and Soda Pop Salute. There's the first book, which is called The Legend of Mr. Creepy, and the second one is The Ghost of Crippler's Creek. And Mystery and Soda are just, they solve neighborhood mysteries. Mystery is the daughter of a police officer. And
it's kind of what age group is it catered towards?
I think it's the whatever that's called, the Lexa score or something. It's 4th grade, but it's 4th to 6th grade probably.
Yeah. Excellent.
But we've heard from kids much older, and grandparents that, enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, um,
That's neat.
whatever. Yeah, it was a
That's
lot
cool.
of fun. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Well, Chad, it's so great to see you doing well and continuing to work on yourself. I think that's such an example to all of us to really just work on ourselves. I think all the listeners and myself too. As you're talking, I'm kind of doing a mental maybe checklist. Like maybe how's my mental health? With all this COVID stuff and then all this vaccine stuff and the war going on, and there's so many things that are going on right now. It's just like, and then within my own house, I've got so much going on that maybe a mental health tune-up would be good. So I appreciate that encouragement.
Yeah, I think if we all did that more often, just kind of a check-in, with some of my therapy, we call EMDR, where you basically go within yourself and you do body scans and where do you feel this and why, and then that opens up a whole mess of things to talk about. And there's so much out there that we just cannot control, and when you start looking at the things you can and focusing on those things, you almost eliminate that helplessness feeling. You feel empowered. You start taking care of yourself, and you don't get to that like low point, or you realize when you start to go down, like, hey, whoa, I need to take a step back. When we work out and we do physical activities, we need to take days off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a mental health day, and like you said, with all that's going on, if you can take care of yourself, self-care isn't selfish.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just not. And we do so many things every day where we're afraid to say this or afraid to say that, and don't want people to know this or don't want to be honest about that. And then we're the ones that suffer for it because we carry that with us all the time, and it builds up every day, and if you don't let some of that go or deal with it, you can find yourself in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chad. I mean, you've shared a lot of great experiences with us. I'm sure there's people out there that are listening that have had maybe similar experiences, or just that day-to-day monotony sometimes can just be so I guess
grinding.
so grinding and so heavy that people just you need to have that check-in. So finally, kind of towards the end here, we always like to ask our guests on the podcast, the name of the podcast is A Brother's Creed, right? We're all trying to build our own personal creeds, and a creed is a set of beliefs or principles that guide someone's actions. That can be a scripture or a mantra or a quote or something, some principles that we live by. Would you be able to share a little bit of with us and the listeners, a little bit of your personal creed?
Well, one of my things that I think is a big deal is perspective. And I think the more perspective we have, the better that we understand things. And when we can see things outside of our own bubble, we're doing ourselves and everyone around us a favor. And everybody has opinions, and we base that on the information that we have. And the more information that we can gather, the more informed of an opinion or an idea that we can share with others. And you're going to find what you look for. If you're looking for conflict, you're looking for the bad things that happen, you're focusing on the things that make you upset or that don't go your way, that's going to be your life. And if you focus on the good and like I said, the things you can control and those closest to you, you're going to be so much happier. You're going to do so much more for yourself and for your family, friends, and those that are just, around you. And that's what I think we owe to ourselves first and foremost. And then being that example should hopefully, bleed off into other people and say, well, hey, I would prefer to focus on the good and be happy as much, choose happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a choice. But when you're doing all those other things, it's a lot easier to make that choice.
I like that.
Yeah, perspective so important. I think every single, you just got to take a step away. That's when sometimes I like just getting out in the woods or out in nature. Gives you a little bit of a perspective on life, just in a quiet
Absolutely.
space.
Yeah. I mean, we need to disconnect sometimes.
Yeah.
And whatever that, that might be different for a lot of people. And that's another thing, perspective. Some people may hate the woods. Okay. You don't have, find what your escape is,
Mm-hmm.
what your break is, and do that. And like I said, self-care is not selfish. And we put that off so much that we're just doing ourselves a big disservice.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the quote, your vibe attracts your tribe, right? So it's kind of like what you put out there is what's going to come back around. And, try to be the one that puts out positivity in the world so that can make its way back around.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what? Some people are really annoyed by that. Some people are like, geez, you're looking there, glass half full again, blah, blah, blah. So annoying. Well, it's annoying because that person doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And they probably wish they could, and they just don't know how. So they find it annoying.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I don't have to deal with many of those people on a daily basis. So.
That's true. I deal with my kids, my wife, and then a couple of people at work. Luckily, being a police officer, you got to deal with a million different people every single day. But
yeah, many of which have a glass is mostly empty mentality, unfortunately.
Yeah. There was something I just saw about I can't remember what it was, but it was something about glass half empty, glass half full. I'm just glad there's a glass here. It was something like that. That was just like a completely different perspective. That, okay, yeah, whatever. It's half empty. It's half full. I have a drink here and I'm going to, refresh my body, so it's,
that's funny.
Perspective again.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time. And listeners out there, if you have any comments or perspectives or experiences, things that we've talked about today, please leave us a comment or contact with us. Chad, where can our listeners find your books?
Amazon is really the easiest place.
Nice.
You go to Amazon and you can search my name and they'll pop up there. So
excellent.
That's the easiest way.
Great. And do you have any type of social media, Chad, or are you taking a break from that?
I mean, I haven't really posted on any of my author type stuff.
That's okay.
I have
Figured
a
I'd
personal
ask.
Facebook account, but yeah.
Search it on Amazon.
Yeah, that's really the easiest thing to do these days. So.
Sounds great. Well, to our listeners, thanks for listening, and let's build our creed together.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.